okay? Yeah, I can just close now. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to Youth Demand, to every single one of you for being here. I do nothing compared to what the majority of you are doing, which is the hard graft in the shadows. So like, big up yourselves for actually being the heroes of this story. I was at a Youth Demand event, we were just talking about it a year ago, and the numbers in this room were about a third of what they are today. So that's in a year. You've trebled your numbers, you're looking great, all of you, and these are the basics that we need to grow for the change that needs to occur. So I just wanted to be here today to support. I'm just like every single one of you in this room, looking around, conscious that we're going to have to be the change that we need to see, right? We can't be waiting, there's no heroes going to fly down, no one's coming to save us, as I think Zara recently said, which is actually what I tell school kids at their graduation every year, which goes down really well. So I wanted to highlight a couple of different things. One is obviously that we live in extremely confusing times, right? So we're living in an era where anti-Semitism, the accusation of anti-Semitism is being used to shut down opposition to genocide, including among Jewish communities and including among Holocaust survivors. We have an Eton millionaire who claims to be the voice of the working class. We have Tony Blair appointed to a board with the word peace in it. You lot tell me how that works. The current government claims to be from the left. Just wondering. And a handful of people with more wealth than half of the global population, right? Taxing the rich apparently is bad for the economy. Just tell us whose economy, because I don't think it's our economy. And I think that all of these really confusing factors are occurring at another juncture that is really important for us to assess effectively. I had the unique opportunity as part of my education to study social movements. I believe in studying social movements for change as in order to be able to more effectively bring about change, you need to know how others have organised, what's worked, what hasn't. There are important lessons from the past to take forward. So a couple of different things I wanted to highlight. So one is the question of what socially orientated policies at a state level look like in a globalised world, right? We're no longer operating just at a state level. Many of you are here today because you also stand in solidarity with groups and individuals and communities around the world. So what does socially oriented policies within a state context look in a globalised world so that we don't repeat the lessons of equity for us, but inequality for others, right? Our success, our achievements can't come at the cost of our brethren in other parts of the world who are just us in a different version, right? In a world where up to 70% of the current workforce is going to be pushed out by AI, where taxation is no longer going to be linked to labour, when we think of the effectiveness of labour unions, we think of the fact that the threat that we pose to the state as unions was a withdrawal of labour. What happens when labour no longer carries that power? Where do people find sources of leverage against the state? I think these are really important questions for us to consider as we move into this new era, as we're sort of sleepwalking into this new era. Because if human labour is no longer the main source of profit and therefore the main source of state contestation, how do we organise power? How do movements avoid mass surveillance when we all carry a tracker at all times? When our every movements, our every thoughts are being watched? Have you noticed that for a while, do you remember we all used to walk around going, I don't get it, I just talked about toothpaste and now I've got a toothpaste ad on my phone, right? But have you noticed now that you don't even have to say the word toothpaste, you just have to think about toothpaste and the toothpaste ad appears on your phone. So that's where we're at, and then obviously we can look to the US as a good example of where we're headed, and that is that the forces that we were sold, and when I say we, I mean usually the white majority, because I think people of colour have been pretty awake to how these forces have been used, because they've been consistently used against marginalised communities. But for the rest of us, we're waking up to the reality that like, oh, actually, border control and ICE aren't the good guys. They're not coming to save us. The police can be violent. You say what? Yeah, it's real. People have been saying it for a hot minute, but now we're catching up. And I think it's about time we really learnt the lessons of what people have been trying to teach us for a long time. And what does the US teach us is that when we're looking at the modes of surveillance that are interacting with the forces of repression, We're seeing the use of shared data among forces like, Palantir, which obviously in the UK now has access to all of our NHS data. If you haven't already, please write to your MP about this specific issue and let them know that you don't want your data to be sold to one of the worst organisations out there. And that's also then being cross-checked with things like Meta, where we now know that our posts, whatever we're posting on social media, is being used to create profiles, right? There are profiles on each and every one of us, and this will be the basis for the repression, and is already the basis for the repression to come. You're obviously more than aware that now when you apply for a visa to enter the United States, you have to reveal your social media history. So good luck with that. I just also wanted to talk about maybe some of the ways in which people have been resisting that, and that I've observed. I've got some friends who organise what they call phone-free parties, and parties are important by the way. Parties are not just frivolous. A movement cannot sustain itself over the long term just through anger and frustration and bitterness, which we're all entitled to feel, but we're going to need to feel some joy in the kind of hope of what is to come. And so resistance parties, which is what I like to coin them, are spaces where you leave your phones at the door, or preferably somewhere a little bit further, and you enter the space where there is a clear rule that there is no tech in the room. We need to have spaces where we can get together and speak openly without the fear that the sort of Big Brother system that we're currently operating with is bringing about. And remember, a lot of Big Brother is operating in ways that are so insidious that we're already censoring what we are saying. I'm censoring what I'm saying to you right now. There's a camera on me. This is going to go online. You think I'm speaking openly right now? Let's be real. I am not. I've seen some really cool face masks doing the rounds. There's some in here, but I'm just, putting it out there that we need to think about how to confront the technologies that are designed to repress and suppress and control and ensure that dissent cannot be heard. And let's be honest, we're not dissenting on anything wild out here. We're dissenting on something as basic as inequality. Something as basic as human rights for all. Something as basic as, the state being responsive to its citizens. Those wild ideas that once upon a time were sold to us as constituent of the democracies that we live in. I'm conscious of your time, so I'm just going to be really quick. I wanted to share a couple of social movements that have really inspired me throughout history, and then if there are lessons you want to take from there, I'm not saying to replicate them because that might not be legal, but I'm just saying you should maybe look at it. Personally, I'm very inspired by the Black Panthers, whose main locus for social change was in their communities. A couple of really important lessons from the Black Panthers. They understood that you don't galvanise hearts and minds through words alone. You're not going to win people over just by talking at them. You're going to have to make love tangible. Love is tangible, and love is tangible in ways through breakfast clubs for people whose kids can't get breakfast, and we know unfortunately there's a lot of them in this country right now. You can make love tangible through childcare groups. You can make love tangible through community defence groups. I see love in the streets of the United States right now when neighbourhoods get together and say, if we see ICE in this area, we are all coming out to block the roads. That is love in action. So what does love in action look like for us right now? We also understand, and they understood well, that coalitions on shared interests and at different points are necessary and mean reaching out to groups that you might not otherwise think of as allies. But might they be allies on this specific issue that you need change on? And might it be that the longer you converse with them, that maybe there's more convergence to be found than difference? And I would urge you to lean into that at a time where we are constantly made to think that people that we differ on are mortal enemies to us. I would urge you to think of people as ultimately, by and large, looking for the same things in life. So what are the coalitions that we can put together that represent a broad-based threat to power? They're groups that the government will look at and not believe that you could be together asking for the same thing. Who are they? How do you reach out to them? How do you set firm boundaries on what we stand for and what we don't? I'd also urge you to look at the Zapatista movement in Mexico in the 1990s. The Zapatistas are still as badass as they were back then, but they are among the first movements to use technology, specifically the internet, as a tactical tool. So they began by flooding internet forums and email lists with their communiques, essentially then bypassing the Mexican state-controlled media at the time. They built a network of networks and NGOs and activists globally, meaning that they had eyes on them. So when they took action and repression ensued, everyone was watching. Remember, non-violence only works if there is a theatre, an audience to look. If you're doing non-violence in silence, in dark spaces, no one cares. That is when repression occurs. So how do you create a theatre for your non-violence? And I know there are lots of creatives in this room, and I'm going to talk to you directly in a second on that. The Zapatistas didn't wait for the state to propose, right? The state was well aware of their contestations, but they didn't sit around and say, right, what are you going to offer us? They began to create the change they wanted to see. They set up their own schools, clinics, and good governance councils, and these became the alternative centres of power, which literally bypassed government control. The third movement that I want to mention and pay homage to is the encampments in America. I want to talk about something that somebody else here mentioned today, which was a video that stayed with me and which I have myself sought to practice at various protests here. And that is, you might have remembered him, he was a young man who was calling on the police to defect. Does anyone remember this video that was doing the rounds? So the police officers were all out here trying to arrest the encampment, and he stood very calmly, very solemnly next to the officers, and he reminded them, you are us. You are not them, you are us. What affects us affects you. You don't need to be doing this. This isn't what you signed up for. You didn't become a police officer to repress people calling out genocide. You didn't become a police officer to arrest young people opposing inequality. So remember that many of those people who are in uniform, eventually, if you look at social movements that have achieved success, they've required defection of high levels in those positions. And so if we continue to only see them as enemies and not reach out to them in various ways to try and bring them to the movement, there is a risk that we will never change the real centres of oppression and power that we do need to shift. And there are successes in this, by the way. You can find examples of this. I'd urge you to look them up. I haven't personally claimed to have converted anyone. I did try and talk to a lot of police officers at the recent Pal Action demos, and they weren't blinking. But we push on. Okay, and then the next one, I don't know, who here has had a look into the Nepal Gen Z uprising that happened in September last year? Anyone familiar with this? Guys, if you have not, I urge you to look into this. This was not just a process, this was a digital first revolution that literally toppled the government in 5 days. And they were using all the tools that you lot literally speak fluently. So it began with the trigger of the Nepo baby, right? They hashtagged Nepo baby, Nepo kids. It was a trend that went viral. They were literally showing up the lavish lifestyle of their politicians and contrasting it with what ordinary citizens were dealing with. And that literally went viral. Then they were basically highlighting lots of corruption via TikTok. I know TikTok is largely compromised, but we'll get on to the idea of new technologies and how we find new spaces to organize. And then, of course, does anyone remember the platform that they used to actually organize the new government? Discord. And guess what? No one was looking at Discord, because isn't that just where gamers hang out? Thank you, gaming people. We appreciate you. We appreciate the spaces that have been created that no one's looking at, that maybe are not conceived to be or perceived to be spaces of resistance, and maybe that's exactly where we need to be. They also remembered the 3.5 rule. You don't need everyone. We don't need everyone. Within days, millions were in the street, and the movement basically reached a critical mass. And they then basically, through Discord, organised who would be the interim Prime Minister. Okay, yes, I'm done. My last one is a shout out to everyone who's been arrested in the way of their willingness to refuse to bend to unjust rules. You are the real heroes of this story. I'm going to plug my podcast. There's an interview I did with a guy called Professor Tad Sturmer, who's a professor of American history. He's written a book called The Resistance History of the United States, and he reminds us that fascists, unfortunately, do not respond to institutional constraints. We wish they did, right? We wish we could say to them, excuse me, but this statute here does not permit. They don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck. You think you're going to hold these people back by reminding them about rules? They literally don't think your rules matter.
And unfortunately, this is where we're at. We're now dealing with bullies who do not believe in any form of restraint or constraint. So what does it mean to organise against fascists when fascists refuse to listen to rules or restraints? And that also just means don't lean into or believe that the institutions are going to be there to protect you or save us. My last shout is for the artists. Art bypasses different, the forms of communication that are more direct. It speaks to the heart before the mind, and it reaches over political divides. Artists, we have never needed you more. And on that note, I'm out. Thank you so much.
Myriam.
Thanks a lot for watching to the end of the video. If you'd like to help the channel out a bit more, then please check out some of our other content and hit various supportive buttons such as like and subscribe. Super thanks are also open, and there's a link to our Buy Me a Coffee page in the description of this video. If you want to go a step further, then hit the join button, and for only 99 pence you can enjoy exclusive perks like members only videos and early viewings, plus lots more, and you get to join the list of awesome people that you can see on your screen right now. As always, your contributions are much appreciated. Thanks again, people. My left eye will be seeing you soon.